How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Momentum Motorsports Meeting. My name is Wyatt Thompson. We are on episode number 52, back at it again. Our first episode of the new year. It's finally here. Man, cannot believe it. I just cannot believe that we are at this point. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. We have got so much to talk about. I'm going to talk about a little bit about my winter plans and kind of what I did during the winter break. And, we'll kind of also catch up on a lot of motorsports news as well. So, yeah, I guess without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. This is Momentum Motorsports Meeting, y'all. All right, so before we kind of kick things off here in this episode, this NASCAR offseason was, just insanely brutal, I guess is the best word to describe it. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. There's just no words to describe kind of what the NASCAR community went through this offseason. I do want to wish my prayers to anyone that was close friends and any family members related to Greg Biffle. About a week before Christmas Day, Greg Biffle, his son, wife, and daughter all tragically passed away in a plane crash in North Carolina. Just no words to describe, what people are going through that were affected from this news. No words to describe it. When I saw it, I was just in shock. I'm like, wow, like really? I was just praying that, it wasn't real. And unfortunately it was. And I went through some of my old die-casts and I found a couple of Greg Biffle die-casts. The first one is number 16 3M that will definitely be remembered for a very, very long time. And he actually ran in the next gen car in 2022, and I found a die cast of that. So kind of put them on my wall, put them on my drawer as a nice little tribute. I'm just shocked, and I'm still shocked to this day. This NASCAR community just it was just in total shock, and many motorsport figures are just held in arms and just giving prayers to Greg Biffle and anyone who might have been affected. That was just crazy. Like, Greg Biffle, he was a fierce competitor, man. Finished runner-up in the standings to Jimmy Johnson in 2007, I believe. Won the Truck Series Championship one year, and then in the Nationwide Series, he also won the championship. Not in the same year, but I think there were a couple years apart. And yeah, that's what some people will remember Greg Biffle. I was never really close to him. I never really followed him as a kid. But the thing that I will remember about Greg Biffle is what he did when Hurricane Helene hit a couple of years ago. I remember that because Hurricane Helene, it did so much devastating damage, in the states that weren't Florida. And what Greg Biffle did, he just went in his private jet and gave relief to those who needed it. Water, food, blankets, etc. And he helped so many people get through such a tough time, because their homes had been completely destroyed. Everything they had worked for was already gone, and Greg Biffle helped so many people in need, and that's what I'm going to most remember him by. So I just wanted to give him a little tribute since I am very, very late to the news. I do also want to share my thoughts and prayers to Denny Hamlin. His father passed away in a house fire on Sunday, just a couple of days before New Year's Day, and Hamlin's mother was in critical condition, and according to Denny Hamlin himself on X, He says his mother is recovering, which is fantastic news. I'm hoping she'll make a full recovery very, very soon. But yeah, just kind of wanting to share my thoughts to Denny Hamlin because he has been through a lot, the past 3 months, I would say, going through the entire lawsuit versus NASCAR. He was literally like one corner away from winning the 2025 Cup Series championship back in November to now this. I remember when he won Las Vegas to advance to the championship 4, he kind of gave a tribute to his dad. And I never really heard too much about Denny Hamlin's father. And I remember just that he wasn't doing very well, health-wise. And, Denny Hamlin wanted his father to witness him winning the championship, and unfortunately, he won't. So I do want to share my thoughts and prayers to Denny Hamlin because what he has been through the past year, it's just, he's fought a lot. And, part of me says that, he deserves a break after what he's done for the sport. And yeah, just the most brutal offseason I think I've ever seen. Like Nick Joanides, I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. He's mainly an ARCA Menard Series driver that competes in the ARCA West Series. He passed away just a few days after Michael Lynette passed away. And shoot, even Brad Keselowski hurt his leg on a skiing trip. Now, thankfully, he will be okay, but man, oh man, just what an insane offseason, and it's been affecting the entire NASCAR community. So just wanted to share, my thoughts and prayers to all family members of Nick Joanides, Dennis Hamlin, and Greg Biffle and his wife, son, and daughter, kind of before we started this episode. Let's talk about motorsports. Let's talk about that. How was everyone's winter break? Was y'all's Christmas and New Year very good? I think mine was pretty good, honestly. I greatly enjoyed it right from the start. My winter break started out like the last week of fall classes. I believe it was December 12th through the 15th, I believe. And what Osprey Racing does is they attend or they go to the North Florida Kart Club every December, and I believe there's one every spring as well. And they kind of work the track because they've got, a bunch of charity races, for End Alzheimer's Motorsports and whatnot. Those two races are at the North Florida Kart Club, and I was representing Osprey Racing, and if you basically worked there, you get in there for free. And the costs to enter and race were kind of insane. But anyway, the people that were in charge of the normal event, they added a 3-hour race for Sunday. So Friday, it was basically just practice, not too much to do. There was some track work, but that was for the paid practice sessions for the drivers that were actually going to race with us. And, it was my turn, and I was having a lot of fun. It kind of felt back to, being in the kart. I kept spinning out in turn 2 for whatever reason, and it was just a bit shocking. And I remember that most of the members for Osprey Racing were actually able to race together in one of the practice sessions, which was a lot of fun. So basically Friday, day 1 was just practice. So now we go ahead and we go into day 2, about an hour of practice, and then we go straight into qualifying for 5 minutes. And shout out to Harrison, the PR lead for Osprey Racing. He qualified first for the team. And the main key on how he got that was just bump drafting on the long straightaway with someone. Just kind of bump drafting, because of the draft and the bump draft, it is huge. It is huge at this track. And I was kind of pumped up. Let's go. Let's see how we do. So the race kind of starts in, Le Mans style. Harrison did about as great as he could in his first stint. I ran in 2 stints, and honestly, the times in those 2 stints were faster than my times that I ran back in 2024, so very, very happy with that. And I think each stint for me was about 25 minutes, so I got a little less than an hour of seat time, which is okay, because there were like 12 of us that, had volunteered, that had represented for the team. I think the team ended up finishing P23 of 26 karts, so honestly not too bad. We're not, competing there. We're not competitive. We're not a competitive team, but we race for fun, and we have a lot of fun. So that was a pretty good day. We had a pretty good time. So now we head into day 3, and this is probably my favorite day, day 3, Sunday, December 15th. So I'm kind of noticing that there aren't going to be many of us at the track, because like we were supposed to be there at, I think it was like 8 a.m., and there was only like 3 of us there, including me, and we were kind of wondering, like, what are we going to do? So I and the other 2 people that are there are told that Osprey Racing, the team, can field 2 karts instead of 1. So I was like, oh, okay. And so I'm just kind of standing there with Tyler, one of our electrical leads, on like what we're going to do. And kind of as we're talking, a couple more people are kind of showing up, every 10, 15 minutes or so. And so I was like, okay, what are we going to do here? Are we just going to qualify? Are we going to try, running the 2 karts, or are we just going to, withdraw one of them and just run 1? So, and Tyler makes a decision for us. He says, let's go with the 2 karts. So I'm like, okay. So I get geared up. I help my teammate get geared up. Yusuf, one of our Osprey Racing team members, we're both going to go out there into qualifying. And all right, everything looks pretty good. I'm just warming up my tires. I'm kind of currently all by myself right now. And I go into the carousel, and about halfway through it, the cart doesn't turn. And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe the tires are cold. Maybe it's just that. The tires could just be cold. So let's just go through it again. So we try again, and again, the same result happens. About, we're able to turn just fine for the first half of the carousel, but for the second half, we just can't turn. So now I'm thinking, okay, is something wrong with the cart, or am I just bad? Am I just washed at, racing competitively? So I'm like, all right, let's try one more time. 3rd time's the charm. Again, through the carousel, and it happens yet again. And at this point, I'm kind of just wondering, like, do I go into the pits? And then I go one more lap just for safety, and it happens yet again. And I'm like, yeah, there's just no way. There's no way I'm doing this. So I'm going to the pits. I'm going to the pits to see if there's something wrong with the cart or if I'm just bad. So I go into the pits. I'm sitting there for a couple of minutes, and I'm telling the people what's wrong, and they're like, "Oh, no, it's okay. It's just the tires. It's just the tires." So I'm like, "All right, it's just the tires. I'll believe them. They know this stuff better than I do. Let's go back out there again." So we go back out there. I leave pit road. This time I have a cart ahead of me, so I'm finally with someone, and I'm like, okay, let's just see if the cart in front of me, happens to have the same issue. And we both go through the carousel, and we have the same issue. So I'm like, okay, it's not me. It's not a me issue. It's not me. So that's the more important part. Let's see. So I'm thinking here, let's just see what we can do. Let's deal with the circumstances, while we're having it, because I'm going to be in the cart for, another 25 minutes or so. So I'm thinking, to start this session, I'm thinking, let's see if we can try to find a teammate. Let's see if we can find someone to work with. At first, I was looking to work with Yusuf, one of my teammates who was also representing the team, because we were fielding 2 karts, but I realized pretty quickly that I just had a faster pace than him, and I'm like, well, that ain't gonna work. So let's see if we can try to find, another kart that's behind us. And sure enough, we were, and I couldn't catch his name at the end of it, and I deeply regret that. But he was in cart number 46, and me and him, I'm telling you, it was so good. It was so much fun. He was basically, I noticed him catch up to me on the straightaway, and I'm like tapping, the back of my helmet as saying to like push me, and sure enough, he gives me a push, and I give him a nice little thumbs up as to say, thank you for the push. Let's see if we can keep this going. And normally I would expect to get past before we go through the straightaway again. Normally, because that's normally what happens. That happened a lot during the 6-hour race Saturday, and I'm thinking, okay, let's see if we can maintain this. And surprisingly, the driver in cart number 46, he stays with me, and that happens for lap after lap after lap, pretty much for the entire qualifying session. And I'm just I'm having the time of my life right now, because I feel fast. I'm passing other carts, and eventually I find out that I qualify the cart P10 out of 13 carts, which was great. That was awesome. I'm like, heck yeah, woohoo! I'm feeling the hype right now. And after the qualifying session is over, the checkered flag is waved, I immediately kind of go, I kind of slow down so me and the driver in cart number 46 can kind of talk it out. And I'm like just cheering. I'm just cheering my fits. It's like I won. You know what I mean? And he's sitting there, he's doing the same thing. And so we finally come to a stop, and we're kind of waiting for a little bit. And the reason that we're waiting is because we have to wait for some of the officials and the people that are in charge of the event to kind of verify, the qualifying order to determine where we start. So I didn't figure that out until I didn't figure out, where I qualified until the very end of the day. So I'm in front of cart number 46. I'm talking to him, figuring out, I'm just telling him, thank you. And I'm wondering kind of what he's doing. And apparently there was actually moisture on the second half of the carousel. So that's why everyone was couldn't turn. And so what cart number 46 did was he basically just kind of rode the outside of the carousel to get a massive run entering the straightaway. And so that's what he told me, and I'm like, okay, well, let's see if we can do that, for the race. And so, about maybe 10 minutes go by. I'm in P10, starting on the outside, and I'm just kind of sitting, before that, I'm just kind of sitting there, and I'm wondering, if I'm going to get replaced, because I see my teammate ahead of me, he's also getting replaced and getting swapped by Harrison. And so I'm wondering, well, is the same thing going to happen to me? And I think due to the low numbers that we had, I wasn't going to get swapped. So I'm like, all right, looks like we're going to be in this cart for I don't really know how long. So we start the race, double file. I'm in P10 on the outside. Everything looks fairly fine. I'm going to go ahead and ride the outside of the carousel and hope everything looks good. And the whole field dives into the carousel, and we don't turn it all as expected. Now, it looked okay for me, but unfortunately, one of the cart, I was kind of trying to slow down because I knew that, the cart, the other drivers just weren't going to be able to turn. So I kind of tried to brake to give, other people a little bit of room, because, I didn't want to kind of damage the cart too much and, kind of prepare myself. And unfortunately, I just kind of mistimed it, I guess, and I get doored heavily, kind of caught me off guard, and I almost spin out, and I almost spin out in the grass, but thankfully I managed to save it. But yeah, it was kind of, a hard hit, and unfortunately it made me lose all of my track position. And I was a little bit bummed by that, and I was like, well, dang it, I can't work with cart number 46, because I think he and I, had talked while everyone was determining the qualifying order, that we were talking like, okay, hey, let's try to work together in this race because it worked so well in qualifying. And yeah, unfortunately, that just with that incident right there, it didn't work out. I just made a bad mistake. So I'm like, okay, let's, it's fine. It's whatever. Let's see if we can find another one. So we pass 2 karts and I'm catching up to 1, and I get closer and closer, and I'm feeling, okay, let's see if we can, let's see if we have the pace to keep up with them. And fortunately for me, I do. So we're kind of trading spots, me and one other kart number. I can't remember the kart number, but we're kind of trading spots kind of back and forth. And enough time goes by. We're about like 25, 30 minutes into this race, and I am feeling it mentally. I'm feeling very fatigued because remember, I was also in the kart for qualifying. I didn't get any break. I didn't get swapped out. So at this point, I've been going in the kart for 1 hour straight, and I'm just sitting here wondering, like as I'm racing, like what's the strategy? Like what's the plan for me? Am I going to have to run this 3-hour race solo? Because I couldn't see anyone else on the team that I had recognized. And I was like, okay, well, how are we going to, do this strategy? Because now in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, what's the strategy going to be? Because I think the rule was for Sunday is that you had to pit 5 times, and every time you pit, you had to swap out a kart. So I'm thinking, okay, let's just see, like what are we gonna do? Because that, I feel like normally, people would also think that, like, what's the strategy gonna be for me if I somehow do have to run this race just solo? But fortunately, after a couple of minutes of just racing, I finally get the signal to pit, and I'm like, okay, so there is a plan. There is a plan for me. I'm not going to be solo, which is, and honestly, that probably would have been for the better. But I was like, thank goodness, thank the Lord that happened. So I'm hyped. I'm very, very hyped. I'm kind of, in a way, I'm kind of glad it's over, and I'm very, very happy. So we're kind of there. I don't, I am, physically and kind of like mentally fatigued a little bit. And I'm like, we finally made it through. And so about another hour and a half kind of goes by. I'm getting ready to go back up again for one final stint. Unfortunately, I'm swapped, someone who was supposed to finish the race is taking my spot. So I'm starting the race, and now I'm finishing it, which is great. So it's about 25 minutes left in the race. I go out, I get in the kart, and it's just kind of, I thought it was going to be, kind of chaotic, and I thought I was going to be working with someone like I did last time, and it was kind of uneventful for the most part. I did catch up to Zach Lister, the powertrain lead. He was also finishing the race in the other kart. I was able to catch up to him, kind of, bump draft him for a little bit, and then I see 2 other karts behind me, and I'm pretty sure that they are, like, leading the race or, like, in the top 5 and whatnot. And so I'm thinking, all right, let's go out. Let's go ahead and make my move. Let's pass my teammate. I get help from, the other 2 karts, and that's pretty much it. And that was basically the 3-hour race. And I think we finished P12 out of the 13 karts that were racing. It's weird because I was like, okay, we probably finished P11. That, like, my teammate, me passing him, that was probably a spot on track. And apparently it wasn't. And I was wondering, I was like, wait, what happened? How did we finish, like, so many laps down compared to our teammate? And apparently it was for black flag, I guess, for maybe, like, minimum weight or something like that. I don't know. It was very, very weird, but I was like, okay, it's whatever, like, it is what it is. So I'm thinking, I'm happy I finished the race. I'm happy I started it. And, I had a lot of fun with this event. It was just absolutely great. I think the overall event went very, very well. More successful than probably last year, I would argue. Man, just the people that are in charge of that event, it's just great. I am so happy to have met them, and I hope to keep doing this before I die. You know what I mean? So that was a very fantastic event for me to be a part of. I know that there will be one later in the year. I just don't remember what date that is. That might be maybe in April. Maybe in April, probably. I would think so. Maybe late in April probably is when the next race would be. So, yeah, that was the 6-hour race. That was basically the end Alzheimer's weekend of wild racing, and that was kind of my experience. So, hope you guys kind of enjoyed that little race review, inside the scenes. I do want to talk about one other motorsport race, the Tulsa Shootout. That was in December 30th, just a couple of days away before the new year. And there is one moment that I do want to talk about that's too fun. It's too funny to ignore. So Gabe Zahner ended up flipping up and over, went over the fence, and he landed in a dumpster. And there were words painted on that dumpster, and it said, "No parking." Now, thankfully, Gabe was okay. I couldn't really determine how he flipped. I didn't really catch what happened, but I just saw it on my Twitter feed, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I have to talk about this." So, a lot of people in motorsports, like whenever you would crash, it was like, "Hey, there's a wall there. Hey, you can't park there," kind of like as a little joke. And the fact that Gabe landed in the dumpster that had words painted saying "no parking," that's just hilarious, man. I mean, thankfully Gabe was okay, and if he wasn't okay, I mean, it probably wouldn't be as funny. But the fact that he was okay, and the fact that he just landed in a dumpster that said "no parking," that's just too funny, man. It's very funny, and it's a very unexpected moment, and it's probably a moment that you wouldn't think would happen, would be possible of happening. So, yeah, that's just kind of the Tulsa Shootout, that one moment that I do really want to talk about. Oh, and that is our new sound effect that indicates our motorsports segment is about to begin. It's something that I was working on during the off season. I hope you guys enjoy the new sound effect. Let's go ahead and kind of start with the NASCAR Cup Series and kind of work our way down. So there's not really too much here. There's one crew chief news regarding the Cup Series. Legacy Motor Club announced that Justin Alexander will be the crew chief of the number 43 for Eric Jones. Ben Bayshore, who was the crew chief last year, he will now transition to the race director. And just based off initial reactions, I kind of like this move. I like it. Justin Alexander, I think, did the best he could during his time at Richard Childress Racing. He was the crew chief for Austin Dillon, won the Daytona 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 with him. And, for whatever reason, Justin Alexander and Austin Dillon are just great in Richmond in the fall for whatever reason. It's like a prophecy that they just have to do well for whatever reason. So I think Justin Alexander is a pretty good crew chief, and I think Ben Bayshore kind of moving to, race director, kind of calling it from like the war room. I think that's still a pretty good spot for him. So that's kind of why I like this move, because Legacy Motor Club, they took, a pretty big step forward in last year, 2025, compared to 2024, because they don't have a technical alliance with Joe Gibbs Racing. They're kind of, starting like their program, you could call it, kind of on their own, kind of building the notebook, making it, be thicker and thicker with more pages added to it. And so that's why I think that Justin Alexander coming from Richard Childress Racing, who hasn't performed the best, especially in the past couple of seasons. I think that's a pretty good move. So I'm excited to see what Legacy Motor Club can do. I'm excited to see what Justin Alexander and Eric Jones can do for sure. And I think maybe the expectation for this team is to maybe finish top 20 in points. They finished top 25 last year, so maybe they can take another step forward and maybe finish top 22 in points. I feel like that would be good. So wishing Justin Alexander the best of luck for this year. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to some NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series moves. There's a lot. There's a lot more. If you thought last episode was a lot, this one doesn't have as much, but it's still pretty crazy. So let's go ahead and just start off with SS Greenlight Racing. They announced that Garrett Smithley will return to the team, this time driving the number 0. And they also announced that Alex LeBay will drive the number 0 for the road courses. For Garrett Smithley, it's unclear how many races he will race, but I can imagine it will probably be a majority of the races this year. And, judging off of initial reactions, I love that he's back in the 0 car. That gives me some memories, man, when he drove that car number for JD Motorsports in the late 2010s. It's kind of bringing back an iconic number in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, since it's called that now. And yeah, I really liked the number 0. The number 0 for Garrett Smithley, it just fit. And for Alex LeBay, super glad he's returning to the team. He did very, very well on the road courses last year. I think expectations are more of the same. SS Greenlight Racing has a pretty good driver lineup. Josh Bilicki, Garrett Smithley, 2 drivers with so many years of NASCAR experience, and I think that could fit in great for this team. And Alex LeBay, he is probably one of the more underrated road course ringers, in my opinion. He's driving the road course in the number 0. This organization should be fun to watch, wishing them the best of luck in 2026. Next up, Jordan Anderson Racing announced that Raja Carruth will drive the number 32 Chevy for 10 races. And this schedule that Carruth has with Jordan Anderson will complete his full-time schedule, which means the other 23 races that Carruth will race, those 23 races are going to be for Junior Motorsports. So not too surprising, just wanted to update a little bit on that. Continuing along with the Chevy teams, Big Machine Racing has announced that Patrick Staropoli will drive the number 48 full-time this year. Ever since Nick Sanchez announced on his X account that he wouldn't be driving the 48, this season, we were all wondering who's going to replace him. And now the answer is Staropoli. Patrick Staropoli brings in funding. It's kind of the way it is, honestly. Like, teams rely on, drivers that have their own funding with them. It's money over talent. That's kind of how I like to put it, because, you have so many incredible drivers like Nick Sanchez. I think Nick Sanchez is a great NASCAR prospect, and I think he has the potential of doing some big things in the Cup Series one day. But unfortunately, he doesn't bring any funding. That's the big issue, with some of these prospects like Nick Sanchez. And same for even Corey Heim. We haven't even heard of what Corey Heim has, and he just went on a generational run in the Truck Series, and I don't know where he's going to be, for next year. So that's kind of why I bring it up. Patrick Staropoli brings in funding. He replaces a great NASCAR prospect of Nick Sanchez. No disrespect to Patrick Staropoli. I think Patrick Staropoli has done, fair. I think he's done a respectable job for, the races that he's ran. But if Big Machine, was out of money, I'm not too surprised that Sanchez got booted out and Patrick Staropoli, was brought in, because he brings that money. And it's just, unfortunate that, that's the way it is. I wish it wasn't, but that's kind of what we have to deal with. And, for expectations, I think he'll do okay. I don't think he'll run bad, but Big Machine Racing was a playoff contending team, and I think there are just way too many expectations that Patrick Staropoli that he might not even make the playoffs. I don't think he'll make the playoffs if, just looking at it objectively, because last year he ran 6 ARCA races, 4 Xfinity Series races, and 4 Truck Series races. And, that big of a step from, just, a handful of races part-time to now full-time, ooh, it's a big step. He's got some big competition. So wishing him and Big Machine Racing the best of luck this year. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about some Toyota teams in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Dustin Albino for J-Ski reports that Taylor Gray and William Sawalich will return to Joe Gibbs Racing this year. This will be their second year in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. And just looking at this, for Taylor Gray, I think it's earned. Taylor Gray did pretty good this year. Finished 7th in points, won the second-to-last race of the season at Martinsville. He did come very, very close to winning it in the spring last year. And, yeah, I kind of think that earned him, another year for the team. Hopefully he can improve. And I think it's possible that Taylor Gray can get into the championship for this year. That's my expectation, at least, because 2025, Taylor Gray was actually pretty consistent. And he was very, very, he was like a dark horse on the road courses. Like, he was like third best from anyone. Connor Zelich, and Shane Van Gisbergen and all the part-time Cup drivers that compete in the road courses, like, they're going to be like top 2 and whatnot, right? Taylor Gray was kind of like in that top 5, top 3 range. And I think if he can translate that into some of the ovals, he could be a championship contender. I legit think that he could be a championship contender. So, wishing Taylor Gray the best of luck. For William Sawalich, I'm glad he's getting another year, because 2025 for the rookie, it was rough. It was hard to watch, for some instances, at least for the first half. The first 18 races, William Sawalich had finished outside the top 25 10 times this year. Only 3 top 10s. Yikes. But there was hope. During the start of July at Sonoma to Talladega in the fall, for those 13 races, William Sawalich started getting better. Finished outside the top 25 twice. 11 top 15 finishes. 3 top 5 finishes, and 2 of those top 5 finishes, he finished second. So, if he can take what he did, at the second half of last year and kind of translate that into the start of this year, he, kind of like Taylor Gray, he could also be a dark horse championship contender. I genuinely think he could. So I'm very, very excited. I'm hoping, that, last year was a learning season for him. William Sawalich is a great Toyota prospect that Toyota has. And I think allowing him, another year to develop and learn is a good step for Toyota. And I'm wishing William Sawalich the best of luck for this year. Now, last piece of news, kind of saving the best of last in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. There is a new Ford team. This team is called Hettinger Racing. They will field the number 5 car full-time, and according to Bob Pockris, the team will get technical support from Ford. They will have Roush Yates engines, and Joe Williams Jr. will be the competition director. He was the crew chief for Parker Retzlaff for Alpha Prime Racing, and also worked with Haley Deegan in 2024 for AM Racing. So, yeah, a new team just like Sigma Performance Services. 2 new teams running Fords. This one, Hettinger Racing. This is a big task. I do not know. I really don't know how Hettinger Racing, or really even Sigma Performance Services, I don't know how those 2 teams will do. It really all depends on who they sign. And for right now, they haven't signed anyone. And it will all depend on who drives for them. But still very happy that a new O'Reilly Auto Parts Series team is in the series, this time for Ford. Ford just desperately needs it after RSS Racing, switched from Ford to Chevy. Same for Haas Factory Team, switched from Ford to Chevy. AM Racing basically shut down. And, that was basically all of the Ford teams last year, and now there's 2 new teams, Hettinger Racing and Sigma Performance Services. Wishing them the best of luck for 2026. They need it. They need it at this point. They need it. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to some NASCAR Truck Series news. A little bit of a rule change, or at least from my vantage point. According to Malt1720 on Reddit, the door number is slightly forward. And you can definitely see it in the graphic, and I saw, the Colleague Trucks account, they announced that Cummins will be sponsoring Brendan Queen's number 12 truck for the entire season, and you can see in that graphic the door number is moved slightly forward. So, just going to give you my initial and instant reaction. I'm okay with this. I don't mind, that this rule was changed. I think it looks a little bit different, sure, but the numbers also look different for when, the next-gen Cup car was introduced, and the door numbers were also forward there that time in 2022. It was not that long ago, and now we kind of find it as the new norm. And I think for the Truck Series, it'll look a little bit different for sure. I'm not going to lie. I think it's also a little bit different. It's unexpected for sure, but I'm okay with it. I don't see this being too much of a problem. If you told me this like 6 years ago, I would not have believed you, because I love the door numbers, kind of being centered, because that way it's easy, it's easy to identify, the truck number. But now I just, with me doing this, I'm okay with it. And I'm just wondering, since the door numbers are moved forward for the trucks, I would like to think they maybe do the same for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next year, or maybe a few years down the line, or maybe even happens in ARCA. So just something to watch out for. This is just kind of a rule change. I don't think it affects too much, except for sponsor space and the sponsors getting more logos and recognition. So I'm happy with this move. Next up, some team news. McAnally-Hillgeman Racing. They've got a lot of drivers to announce. They announced that Daniel Hemrick will return to the 19 truck for the team. McAnally-Hillgeman Racing also announced that Chris Wright will drive the number 81 full-time, and that's pretty much it. First off, Daniel Hemrick returning is huge. McAnally-Hillgeman Racing is going to be a deadly team to beat with this year. I'm calling it right now. Kristen Eckes reuniting with the team. Tyler Ankrum, who had his best season yet of his career last year, and I'm confident that he will get even better this season. And Daniel Hemrick, who won a couple of races for the team last year, and I think the expectation for Daniel Hemrick is to pull through and maybe even get a Truck Series championship, and maybe even make it to the championship 4, assuming that NASCAR continues to have, some sort of playoff format. So very, very happy with this move. When I think of Chris Wright, I get he brings funding, but McAnally-Hillgeman Racing could have a lot of trouble financially. If you don't remember, Chris Wright ran for Wyatt Motorsports last year in the Xfinity Series, and he was involved with so many incidents that year that Wyatt Motorsports had to shut down for good. And right now, I don't think Chris Wright is fully to blame for Wyatt Motorsports shutting down. I think Wyatt Motorsports just didn't really have it anymore, especially the way, they kind of lost Anthony Alfredo. They had to let Brett Moffitt go due to, due to funding in 2022. Same for Jeb Burton. So I don't think Wyatt Motorsports, I don't think Chris Wright, was fully to blame, but I definitely think he shared part of the blame. And I just worry a little bit for McAnally-Hillgeman Racing, a little bit financially, because, what if they have to kind of limit and downsize a little bit, because you have 3 really, really good drivers. No disrespect to Chris Wright. I think Chris Wright could do very, very good, especially with Daniel Hemrick, who's a veteran, Tyler Ankrum, who went on his best season yet, and Kristen Eckes, who basically was a huge championship contender in 2023. So I think Chris Wright will do good. I think he'll do fine. I hope, and I think a lot of other fans are hoping that he just doesn't tear up equipment for this season. So wishing Chris Wright and Daniel Hemrick the best of luck for this year in the Truck Series. Next up, Hill Motorsports, owned by Timmy Hill, has announced its 2026 plans. The team won't be full-time this year, but they did announce that they will run 17 races, with more races potentially getting added. Very, very interesting, because Hill Motorsports ran full-time in the ARCA East Series, and they actually didn't do bad statistically when the team ran in that series. So this probably means that ARCA isn't on the table anymore. Perhaps maybe it wasn't going to work financially. Maybe the results just weren't showing it. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll never really know. But wishing Hill Motorsports the best of luck for 2026. Next up, Tricon Garage announced that Tanner Gray and Gio Ruggiero will return to Tricon Garage for the 2026 season. Tanner Gray will drive the 15, and Gio Ruggiero will drive the number 17. I think, I'm happy for these two drivers. I think they did well this season. Gio Ruggiero got his first win ever in the Truck Series at Talladega back in the fall. Tanner Gray had a very, very similar year last year than in 2020, comparing 2025 to 2024. Like, the statistics are so similar. It's so hard to pick off the differences. And I guess for these, seeing this announcement, I'm just waiting for these two to punch through and, have their best season yet, especially for Tanner Gray, because Tanner Gray, he's been in the Truck Series for quite a while, and I think it's been 4 years full-time that he's been, and he still hasn't found a win. That's a little bit concerning. So hopefully, with Corey Heim gone and Caden Honeycutt, taking over his ride for this year, I'm hoping that Gio Ruggiero and Tanner Gray can finally break through and get a couple of wins. I think it's possible. I know they're capable of doing it. Hopefully they can get it done. Wishing those two drivers the best of luck. Next up, Front Row Motorsports announced that Chandler Smith will return to the team this year, driving the number 38. Big news for the Truck Series, because Chandler Smith, he was awesome. He was awesome to watch this year. I mean, the dude didn't win as much as Lane Riggs and Corey Heim last year, but he was literally right there with him, and I literally had him making the Championship 4, but just 2 bad races in the first round of the playoffs, and he got bounced. Just very, very disappointing. I was a little shocked. When it happened, to be honest, and, this year, 2026, I'm expecting some redemption. I am predicting that Chandler Smith will win 3 races in 2026, and I think that's doable, and I think he'll be one of those championship contenders to watch for, especially at the start of this year. So, mark my words, I think he will be a championship contender. Front Row Motorsports is clearly championship contenders. I'm excited to see what he can do with another year with Front Row Motorsports. Good luck to Chandler Smith. Last little piece of Truck Series news. Mike Seneca, who hasn't raced in the Truck Series since 2018, he is setting up a GoFundMe to race in the Craftsman Truck Series. According to Declan Wayman, he intends to run St. Petersburg and race that Navy street base in California. So, yeah, I mean, glad to see this happening. This is definitely a little bit unexpected, since Mike Seneca hasn't raced in, it's almost been a decade. It's been 8 years since he's raced in the Truck Series, and he'll be turning the age of 60 at the end of April. Wow. Bringing back the Norm Benning vibes right now. Hopefully it works out, depending on how, if it goes well or not. I myself might put up some money, just because I like seeing this stuff happen. So that's all of the Truck Series news. Gonna save ARCA. That's gonna be next week. We'll move on to some open wheel news, some IndyCar news. IndyCar released its start times. Just overall not too bad. There is some conflict for 2 races, and it's basically, I think the start time is conflicting with a couple of the races from the NASCAR schedule. The one thing that I like about IndyCar being on Fox is that, at the end of the NTT IndyCar race, it leads to the NASCAR Cup Series race. And that's what I really, really like. So it's basically kind of like 5 hours of racing, which is great. So overall, I'm happy with it. Hopefully they can get, the conflict for those 2 races kind of resolved, and hopefully, I won't have to be swapping back and forth between channels. Like, I really don't want to do that, especially if it's motorsports related. So just kind of thought I would talk about that real quick. Last little pieces of news before we go ahead and call it a day. Bob Pockrass reports that Chip Ganassi Racing is adding 2 drivers to its Indy NXT lineup. James Rowe and Carson Etter, they join Bryce Aaron and Niels Coolan for a 4-car Indy NXT stable at Chip Ganassi Racing. Pretty big investment from Chip Ganassi Racing, from 2 full-time cars to 4, doubling their investment, their operations. That's a tall task, but I think that's one that Chip Ganassi can definitely handle. Hopefully that entire group does well in the Indy NXT series. Definitely going to be ones to watch. Last little bit, some WeatherTech IMSA news. I just want to talk about this, mainly regarding the Rolex 24 that's in a couple of weeks. Bob Pockrass reports that Connor Zilic will race in the number 31 Cadillac car for the GTP class, joining Earl Bamber, Jack Aitken, and Frederick Vesti. I think last year he ran in the LMP2 class and won, I believe, or came very, very close to winning in the LMP2 class. And now he's joining the GTP class, and that's for the overall win. And I think he could win the Rolex 24 out of the 60 cars that are entered in the Rolex 24. I think it's definitely possible, but Team Penske, they won it the past 2 years. He's got some competition. And speaking of entries, I saw an article by John Dagis. I apologize if I'm not saying that right. And he reports that WeatherTech IMSA almost had 90 entry requests for the Rolex 24. And obviously the Daytona pit lane can't hold 90 cars, but just looking, I just thought I'd mention it because I kind of wish it could, because, like, imagine having 90 cars compete in the Rolex 24. Like, that'd be so cool. You know what I mean? I do feel bad for the teams that, that did enter the Rolex 24 that aren't going to be racing. But there's other races in the WeatherTech IMSA series, not to mention the famous 24 Hours of Le Mans that they can also enter. Just unfortunate, but just wanted to kind of share that little bit of WeatherTech IMSA news, since we are just a couple of weeks away from the Rolex 24 weekend. So, yeah, should be very, very fun. Can't wait for that. And that's going to do it. Man, we kind of covered a lot. We covered a lot this episode. I really, really hope you guys enjoyed listening to this episode. There's going to be a lot more. Next week is going to be all ARCA Menards series. I'll be at the ARCA Menards pre-race practice session, and, I can't wait to pretty much cover everything that I've witnessed. I'll talk about the practice results, the drivers, the people that I'll interview, all that stuff. So I will see you all later. Have a great day, everybody. Take care, y'all.